Hey, this is Barry with Workshop Hustle. I want to show you how I took an old broken saw blade and some firewood and made a set of sweet knives. Let's dive in. So, to get started on these knives, I mocked up a knife profile in Photoshop and sent it over to a friend who works at a machine shop with water jet. It was a good thing because this high carbon steel was incredibly hard. I grabbed my Merlin 2 mini angle grinder with a 60 grit flat disc to start cleaning the surface. I finished up with a 120 grit disc. Over at the bench grinder, I started cutting the edge. Since this is my first knife, I only wanted to attempt a single bevel edge. Finished cleaning up the edge with 120 grit on my benchtop belt sander and a bevel angle guide. All of the tools also used in this build will be listed in the description for reference. I then used my 3 levels of diamond sharpening stones to finish honing the bevel. The blades went into the oven for heat treatment for 30 minutes at 400 degrees. After the heat treatment, I wet honed the edge of the blade and used a Scotch-Brite pad with some metal polish to bring out the shine. So the first step with the handles was to get a relatively flat surface on the oak and maple firewood that I had taken off my father-in-law's property. Over at the bandsaw, I cleaned up the edge and started resawing both pieces into 1/4 inch thicknesses. I ran the pieces very lightly through my planer to clean up the edges. And then for the glue up, I alternated the oak and the maple for a stripe effect on the handle. After unclamping the pieces, I used my Rockler taper jig on my table saw to give the block a nice cleaned edge. I took this laminated block to the bandsaw and resawed it at about 1/4 inch for the finished thickness of the handle. The profile of the blade was transferred to the laminated blank, making sure to mirror the 2 sides. and then back over to the bandsaw to cut out the handle shapes. I cut outside the lines, leaving about a 1/16 of an inch to be sanded down later. So I was in a rush to get these done, and not having access to knife handle bolts, and even the knowledge on how to install them, I used what I knew, wood pins. Since I did not want any issue with expansion or contraction, I used a carbonized bamboo that was left over from the wood flooring in our house. After sanding down the bamboo pins to a round shape, I stacked the handles under the blade and used it as a drill guide. Next, I mixed up some 5-minute epoxy to attach the handles to the blade. I centered the pins and then tapped them all the way through. Some small C-clamps provided the pressure needed for the epoxy to cure. After the epoxy cured, the pins were cut off with a flush cut handsaw, and now it's time to sand. I started sanding with my Dremel with a sanding cylinder to clean out the one curved finger rest, and then over to the belt sander to clean up the flat sides. After the edges were sanded flush to the blade, I set the angle for a bevel on the edges rather than rounding them like a normal handle. I really wanted to stick with the angular look and feel of the handle and blade. Finally, a knockdown sanding of 120, then 220 grit by hand with a sanding sponge. For a simple, durable, and repairable finish, I'm wiping the handle and the blade down with Odie's Oil Universal Finish. Buff it on, wait about a half an hour, and then buff it off. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and pound that like button. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn the notification bell on. And we'll see you in the next video.